Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Grant Street Experience. I am your host, Grant Ervin, Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Pittsburgh. We have a packed lineup here today. First, let me introduce our co-host, Rebecca Kiernan. Rebecca, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Grant.
So who have you found for us today? Who is the special guest on the Grant Street Experience?
This morning, we are talking to the great Sylvia Harris, who is the city's Chief Information Security Officer and Assistant Director of Security.
Welcome, Sylvia. We haven't seen you for a while. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, and it's good to be seen. I haven't seen you guys either for a while, so it's good to see you all.
We just made our way back up to the sixth floor last week.
Okay.
So it's we're kind of milling around on the other side of the hallway there. So we'll start kind of bumping into you guys, I think.
Yeah, we should. We start coming back next week. So
awesome. Where does one get, I don't know, this is like be a little late in the game, but where does one get a official background like that? That's pretty sweet.
So actually, my background is in IT infrastructure, right? And so I've been with the city for 13 years. And for 11 of those, I managed the infrastructure, right? So as you remember from, when you guys were part of IMP, I managed the back end, the servers, the storage, routers, switches, also the front end support desktop, service desk, tier one database, email, right? So pretty much everything that was operations. Done that for a very long time. I've been in IT for 30 years. Yeah. and in that time, run the gamut of that. I also have done security, right? But it wasn't like a dedicated full time, right? Now, sometimes the advantage with that is because I didn't have a full-time dedicated program, security had to kind of be organic, right? Mm-hmm. So as we did programs or projects, it's like, okay, well, as we think about this, we have to think about how the security gets built in with this, right? Which is very different from traditionally how security has worked, right? Because typically, and even when the internet was built, it was not built with security in mind, right? Mm-hmm. So it was built and then security was kind of bolted on after the fact. And we all know that after factory add-ons are usually don't work as well as if it was planned alongside. So we do have that going for us. And so I'm told that people with my background are the best for roles of CISO, right? Because they understand infrastructure and they understand where the pain points are, right? And they also understand that it's not because a lot of complaints that you hear about my types are that, we get in the way of people wanting to do things, right? So we have to, yes, right. We have to run this past security and they're going to say no, right? And of course they're going to say no because, hey, what's going on, right, is scary as heck.
Right.
And so, you really have to kind of, to be really successful at this type of thing, you have to be able to align yourself with the business initiatives, and talk with people and find out what they're going to do, assess the risk, mm-hmm. present that, find out what type of appetite you have for risk, and just be able to make things as safe as you can,
right?
For the things that need to be done. So to sum up the answer to your question, this is a role, I guess, that from my understanding is something that I have been practicing for my entire career.
You've been auditioning every day and you never knew it.
Yes, every day for the last 30 years. Mm-hmm.
Well, talk a little bit about, I guess, some of that arc, because you've seen a lot in kind of your career in terms of just maybe focusing on the city, I guess. In just the last 10 years, the role of both the internet and digital government has effectively changed the way that, businesses and local governments are working. What does that mean from your perspective?
So, from my perspective, to be perfectly honest, it's a nightmare. Um, or maybe I should say it's what keeps me up at night, right?
Right.
Because the possibilities are really exciting, right? When you think about some of the things that can be done. What I really like is that you see the people take security more seriously now,
Mhm.
and there is a lot more buy-in, right? I've seen a lot of the adoption of some of the things that I've been trying to do has been great.
Mhm.
Not getting a lot of pushback from people. They're taking it very seriously, and they understand that it's important that we keep safe. Um, because nowadays you turn on the news, and if it's not the first, it's the second story. There's been some big security breach somewhere,
Right.
and you just don't want to be in the news if you can help it. Um, right, and so it's good that people are taking it seriously, and I think that really kind of has been part of the evolution, unfortunately, is that there's been such a fine finger put on what, fine point to what has been going on.
What comes first? Is it, the advent of new technologies, so like the conversation around smart cities and sensors and all of the push to data, right? Was, you saw that probably about really maybe a decade ago. The advent of these technologies come along. Is the malware and the problems, do they happen concurrently, or are they after the fact, or people scheming it, beforehand?
They're scheming constantly, right? The thought that the bad guy is some kid sitting in his mother's basement wearing a hoodie. It's not. They are very organized shops, people that go into work every day just like you and I.
Wow.
um, they're hands-on. It's not a bot. Some of these attacks are targeted, so it goes on constantly. There are constant sprays trying to identify some vulnerabilities, and things like that. So it's not something that comes after the fact. It's something that's always there, and that kind of goes back to the point that I was making in the beginning, that it's very helpful if you can have security involved as you build these things, as you stand these things up. Kind of think about what security is going to look like, as opposed to waiting until something horrible happens, and then, oh yeah, by the way, we need security, right?
Right. That's
How does somebody like you keep up with all those evolving threats? Like, is there continuing education, or like every time you hear about it in the news, it's some like novel way to breach some security, at the government level? Like,
Yeah,
what?
that's a great question. So, and unfortunately, a lot of times we are kind of behind the eight ball on this, right? Because you find out about it once it's happened. There are some things that you can put in place to try to help catch these things before, but mostly, I subscribe to different newsletters, security blogs. There is the MSISAC, which is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is affiliated with the FBI and CISA. And so they have this analysis center. They have a SOC, or Security Operations Center, that gathers all this information, and they try to get it out to us as quickly as they can once they hear, hey, this is happening, or this is expected, and here's what you can do to try to mitigate it. Right now, so that means that I get a lot of information every day. There's a lot to sort through, and then I have to figure out, does this apply to us? Right?
Mm.
Because if they say, okay, well, there's an impending attack on giraffes, I had to throw giraffes out there for you, Grant.
Right.
Then I need to know, do we actually have giraffes? Is that threat, pertinent to us, right? Or is it just something that I file away in case we get a giraffe later, right?
And so that information, I mean, like you said, it's voluminous, right? It's coming constantly, because there's always a new evolution of a new threat. I mean, what are some of the things that both, I guess, on the organization or on the architecture side, that can help bolster against those?
Yeah, that is the question that I needed to hear, right? So if I had to say the most important thing that you can do, the most important thing that you can do is cybersecurity awareness training, right? Because 99% of these breaches that you've seen started with somebody clicked on something that was malicious,
Yep.
or got socially engineered somehow, right? And so if you get that awareness training out there where people recognize, look at the URL before you click on it. This might look like it's Google, but first, if it's spelled with 3 O's, then
or 2, yeah.
it's probably not. But the way that you tell, because as these threats evolve, they get more and more sophisticated all the time, right? So you don't always necessarily have the misspellings and the bad grammar and things like that. So there are certain things that that we try to train users to look for and to be aware of, as they go about their their day-to-day duties.
What about on the other end too? I mean, you said like there's people getting up, going to work and are behind some of these threats. I mean, not that you have intel in the criminal mastermind world, but like what are some of the motivations or why the malicious behavior, I guess?
So, it had originally started out as just mischief, right? Let me see if I can break into this, or let me see if I can cause some disruption. And what it's kind of turned into, not to get too terribly dark, but
that's okay. This show focuses on resilience. We're cool with it.
It's monetary, right? A lot of it is monetary. And a lot of the money, you have these ransomware attacks where they demand money, and that money goes to fund some pretty seedy things, right? Terrorists and human trafficking and things like that, right? So a lot of it is monetary. Some of it is nation state. Those kind of things. I can't launch this war on your shores. However, I can disrupt your operations. Wow. And right, and make your and dig into your credibility, right? So that is where that's where it's gone from originally just kind of being mischief.
And in many cases, you're on the front lines, like local governments are on the front lines of this behavior in terms of, I think about, the scenarios in what was Baltimore and Atlanta, and, you saw them being some of the cities being like the early targets in terms of some of the, particularly like the nation state activity. What has happened since some of those events across the industry, I guess, here, both domestically and abroad? I mean, that you've seen since cities have become targets in some regards?
So I've seen a lot more collaboration, right? Because we see this happening a lot, and like I said, the MS-ISAC types and CISA, they are kind of branching out to not just include government, right? And if you remember, we attended a cyber, right, a few years back, and we talked about how great it would be if we could stand up like a collaboration between the government sector and the private sector, and stand up an ISAC like that, to because they're seeing those attacks too, right? But they don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily get publicized, I think, as much as with government, but it still does. So the collaboration is what I've seen. That's really kind of key, right? If it happened to you and you saw this and you report it, or somehow or other we collaborate and talk about, hey, here's what happened, here's what we did, here's kind of a playbook. Maybe you can take a look and see, maybe they're already in your environment. Maybe you can, here are some things that you could do to mitigate, and really just kind of just like with anything else, communication.
Right. It's kind of interesting you say that, like, just from like the resilience point of view, like we have seen more and more and been a part of it, through the city of Pittsburgh, been a part of these types of city to city collaborations and like the networking, the network building, and how important, you're right on about that, like how important it is for cities and, local government professionals to share this information to help kind of build capacity, but to also like learn from failures as well as the successes.
Failure, and I kind of talked about this a little bit with David Feiner, right? We really have to redefine how we look at failure, right? Because
Right.
failure really is kind of a fact-finding
Yeah.
exercise, right? And I talked about, my mother, one of the things that drives her absolutely nuts is, when somebody, if you've misplaced something, right? And you're looking for it and you say, it was in the last place that I looked, right?
Right.
Or it's always in the last place that I looked. And she's like, of course it's in the last place you look. You found it. Why would you keep looking? That's just dumb. Right. But if you kind of talk about say it's your keys, right? And you misplace them and you go to where the last place you thought they were and they're not there, right? Then you don't stop and go, oh my God, I'm a failure. I don't deserve to have a car. No, they weren't there, and you go and you look somewhere else, right?
Right.
And then if you look there and they're not there, then that's not a 2-time failure where you really don't, you keep looking and it's part of the process and you've eliminated the places that they aren't until you find them. And if we kind of think about failure, redefine it in a way that, did you fail or did you learn something? Did you learn what not to do and how to better refine that process? I think, I think that would be helpful for a lot of people, maybe that kind of mindset boost.
Definitely. Because we all experience it, right? Like
all the time.
It happens constantly. It happens every day in every project. There's something that, slips up, doesn't go the way that you thought it would, and you have to go back to the drawing board, re-engineer it, and keep pressing forward.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you were a part of a project that we helped to lead with Sylvia a couple years ago. I wanted to relive this a little bit with the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative and our friends at Microsoft through the platform partnership. Maybe some reflections from you on kind of that experience and the importance of like tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
So we had an opportunity to get some free technical services from Microsoft, who came in and did this tabletop exercise with us and ran a scenario of, so this is how I got excited about cybersecurity, which I had never thought about before, but they ran a scenario of like compounding stressor events that then led up to, so to get specific about it, there was if you remember a couple of years ago, there was this whole clown issue. So the police were busy looking for clown events. Right. And then civil unrest and a protest happening in Oakland. And then all of a sudden the city county building had this emergency where the city county buildings
was a gas leak.
It was the heat, yeah, and it had been infiltrated via a cybersecurity attack. But basically, all of your services are stressed with all of these other events, and then there's this big coordinated attack against a building, or it's super interesting. But yeah, running through all of those exercises and then understanding the way that they specifically the communications are done so that you're not disclosing too much information. It was really fascinating. I don't know, Sylvia, if you have any other thoughts on that exercise.
Yeah, I thought it was great, because we were able to include other departments and agencies, with it, and talk about, hey, well, you have these resources. What would you do? Say we don't have a plan and we're not in communication with each other. What would you do in this instance, right? And that's really kind of when you talk about ITIL and some of the guiding principles, the start where you are, right? So you have a mobile command truck. where would you put the mobile command truck under these circumstances? How would you man it? You know, and then that's kind of how we start gathering some of that information that we can use in the event that, you know, clowns start appearing from the woods and there's a gas leak at the same time. And
I thought it was really interesting just in the scenario itself, which had been pulled from, I think, something that actually happens at Microsoft. I mean, some of the events were, you know, compounded together, but the gas leak is something you don't, you know, in a world that everything's changing to like Internet of Things, you know, messing around with that gas system, I think, you know, 4 years ago was something that wasn't really thought about in terms of cybersecurity. It was more about, you know, how you explained before, like the weakest link clicking on some link that then
right.
system, right?
Right. I mean, you know, you when you think about disasters and emergencies, they can run the gamut. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be that the building has become a smoking hole for it to be, you know, for it to be considered disastrous for us, right?
Right.
So yeah, it was, but it was great that they had all of those things happening at one time, because it kind of made you think, if any one of these scenarios were to happen, what would you do and what do you need, right? Or how do you think through this type of thing? And what do you do if a bunch of things all go wrong at one time, right? How do you, you know, because one of the things that we did talk about that a lot of people don't think about, when you have situations like that, a lot of times, you know, people, their human nature is that you're going to be more worried about your family. You're going to be concerned, you know, you may not necessarily be, you know, your first thought might not be, how do I secure the, you know, this. Your first thought might be, I got to go pick up my kids from daycare, or, you know, those types of things. So how do you allow for that, for the human element as well, you know, when dealing with this type of stuff?
It's super critical, and you know, I mean, that was a tabletop exercise. We've been going through a real life tabletop exercise for the last 18 months or so. I'm interested, Sylvia, from your perspective, could you talk a little bit about you know, the impact of the pandemic on the IT space in the city, but also, I mean, you guys did some really heroic stuff in terms of moving the city to a virtual platform in literally hours. Maybe could you walk through that for us a little bit? Because I think it's a fascinating story.
Sure, it is. And, you know, this is something that, you know, I mentioned a little bit earlier about ITIL, right? And, you know, a lot of those principles we kind of use, right? Like, start where you are. What kind of equipment do we have? How can we get this deployed? How do we get people out of here as quickly as we can? And, you know, everyone, and I don't know, and I talk about this for anybody who will listen, you know, the entire department is ITIL V4 trained and certified. This was an effort that we went through 2 years ago. I do have a case study. I will send you a copy of the paper that we did. Sorry about the lighting here. It's raining cats and dogs outside, and I was sitting here by the front door. I had to close the door, and that was kind of my lighting. So I haven't run into some
same thing. I was like sweating gumballs, and then I had to turn the air conditioning on. So.
Yeah, so it's not like there's some, you know, clown showed up, and so I ran into a bunker. Didn't want you to think that. Right. But yeah, we you know, working as a team, you know, we use those principles to kind of, you know, because if you recall, there was some challenge as far as cross team collaboration, right? Sure. And so it required a lot of that for us to be able to pull off getting everyone out of there in a timely fashion, right? So, you know, I attribute a lot of it to the whole ITIL practice that we have, has become part of our DNA. And, you know, the heroics of the hard work of everyone in the department. It took everybody in the department to be able to pull this off, and, you know, kudos to all of them.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and so I guess going into that, like, we had the infrastructure in place by and large, right? In terms of managing a virtual platform. Did we have, you know, all of the, I guess the question I'm looking for is like, how did how did it change, if at all, in terms of working from a physical, centralized office environment to being in a distributed kind of virtual environment?
So we had a lot of the pieces in place. You're correct. We just had to kind of expand it quickly, right? As quickly as we could. Really the biggest challenge, other than like physically getting the equipment to the users. Hold on. That door opened itself back up. I don't know. Anyway, the biggest challenge, aside from getting the equipment to the users is, that was kind of when we had to step up the cybersecurity awareness training, right? Because now you're offsite. People are using their own computers, right? They're VPNing back in. And so when you're on-prem, I can help protect a little bit better. When you're offsite, right, and you're using your own equipment, now I have to kind of train you into, make sure you're running Windows updates, make sure you have a good antivirus, make sure, that you're doing the due diligence that maybe you weren't doing before, and you certainly weren't used to doing it at work, because we do it for you, right?
Interesting. So like that, what we used to call it, bring your own device, the BYD, which, right?
And I don't know where it's been, essentially, right?
Right.
And so, and we do have things, we have VPNs and we have all of that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong. It's just when you have folks that are working from their home machines, and they're doing a lot of that work there in the cloud, keeping them from clicking on the wrong thing and infecting their machine, that's kind of where the challenge is, right? Because if you bring your own device in and you're connecting to the network, then I'm gonna force certain things onto your machine to make sure that it's, that it's compliant with what it should be.
Interesting.
So you're working from home, right? And it's your machine, right? And most people, when they're using their machines, they're working as an administrator, right? Terrible thing. Do not log in as an administrator on your own machine. Log in as a regular user. If you have to install something, use that administrative credential, because most of these malicious threats are able to spread across your machine because you are an administrator, right? Wow. And so they get in under your credentials. They have full reign of everything that's happening on your machine.
Is it a best practice, and not that it's possible for everyone, but like, to keep devices separate, like your work devices, personal devices, home devices, like,
yeah, if you can, if you can do that, then yeah, that would be a good practice. Or just a separate device. It doesn't have to be a full computer. It could be a separate device. Where you could, where you could, an iPad or something like that, where you could use, you could connect to a virtual machine, right? Where we would be able to separate what you're doing work-wise from what's on your personal machine. That's always the best way to go about it.
I never thought about it this way, but it's kind of interesting. Whereas like the world of technology is moving more and more towards integration, right? Like that you can get all your information on multiple devices, or work from your television screen, or you have a separate iPad, a laptop, whatever. But yet that is the antithesis to good security. Is that?
Yeah, again, it's a nightmare. However, great opportunity though, right? I mean, the idea is information, communications, being able to collaborate, being able to accomplish your goal, right? And so we talk about, right, the days when IT was, here, Grant, here's your great PC. I think it's great. See ya.
See you later.
Breaks, right? And so and it might be great to me because I'm a tech person, and it's it's the fanciest, it's got the newest whizzly bobs and all of that kind of thing. But for you, right, did I even stop to ask you what it is that you're trying to do?
Right. That's interesting.
and what kind of equipment you need, and how do you travel? Are you left-handed? I mean, that all of those things, never bothered to ask you that. I just gave you the best, biggest, best, greatest tech that there is. And I walked away with a big smile on my face because I know you're going to do fantastic things. And you can't even figure out how to turn it on because it is so new, right? That you just wave your hand across it. But I didn't mention that to you as I walked away in my excitement, right?
I'm not gonna admit that I've had that problem. So.
Well, I mean, that's traditional IT, right?
Yeah.
That is traditional IT. And I've seen it done. I've done it myself in the past, right?
I mean, just a quick story with, I have the Microsoft Surface that I'm using right now. And, I had, not that I'm looking for help right now. Paul super hooked me up, but like, screen froze. And I'm like, there's no Control Alt Delete, couldn't turn off. Like, how do you take out the battery? Like, it's designed to be sleek and, secure.
It's a fantastic piece of tech.
Fantastic piece of tech, but like, I want to turn it off and I couldn't turn it off. So
yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, so that's where the challenge kind of comes in, right? And we keep coming back to that. What is it that, keeping security aligned with the business, right? Yep. And keeping tech aligned with the business as well, right? We got a great deal on a truckload of HP printers.
Well, yeah, like, it doesn't mean we need them, right?
It doesn't mean we need them, or we have a use case for them, right? We need to make sure that we understand what the business is trying to do, and then we start aligning the tech, right? And we did a lot of that with we call persona management, right? Mm-hmm. So we went around to different departments and we kind of looked at, hey, what are you doing? What do you need? What kind of tech do you need to have? And we've started to build different personas based on, the departments and the different roles that people have, so that we can get a better idea for what is it that you need, and not, hey, I brought you the newest Lenovo Yoga. It spins around 360 degrees and the pen pops out and you can use it as, what are you going to do with that, right?
It helps you lose weight, makes you look sexier. Like,
exactly, exactly. Ride horses and run in the park, right? But is it functional, and does it help you to do what it is that you're trying to do?
Rebecca, I'd be interested from your experience, not that you're looking for any free IT advice from Sylvia, but like, just as a user in this virtual environment, what's the transition like been for you from going from, like, the office environment to the virtual environment, and now starting to transition into like a hybrid space? Like, what's your experience been like?
I mean, it's been pretty smooth. I haven't noticed there hasn't been a whole lot of issues with the tech itself. But what I have noticed is a lot more emails that seem really suspicious. So I'm really curious, like so I got a really sophisticated one, or two of them. And because it takes me a long time to respond to emails, I noticed them both on the same day, even though they were sent separately. 2 emails with the same wording that are sent by allegedly partners of ours, but different people. And it looked like someone, once I realized it was the same letter and click here, it looked like somebody had just taken like the signature and screenshot it and stuck it into an email. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, I only didn't click on it because I noticed 2 of them at the same time and thought they were strange with the same heading. So like, Sylvia, what is like the volume of instances like that, or of like threats that you're seeing, like on a day-to-day basis? And like, what happens if I click on something like that?
Okay.
Do I ruin the entire city's, servers or whatever?
You could. So to answer the first question, we could see hundreds of those in a day. Wow. We could see none in a day, right? It depends. It's a cycle, right? And so, and I get a report monthly. I'm going to say average, we probably see 100, 150 of them in a month. There are some weeks that we see that much, when it gets to be around holidays and things like that, because people are on vacation or out of the office and they're just kind of trying to click through email and get through, and they're really not paying attention as much. So we can see a lot of those. We do have some protections against some of it, but there are still some that do get through. So the second question, what happens if you click on it? It depends on what it is, but it kind of brings us back to some of the big ransomwares and infiltrations that we've seen in the news over the last several months. Most of those were social engineering, or someone clicked on something that then caused this ransomware to be able to take hold.
Wow.
That's how those began, right? Because you click on them, it downloads something to your machine,
Yeah.
or you click on it and it asks you to sign in here, right? Free ice cream. Just put your credentials in, right? Who doesn't want free ice cream? And so now they have your credentials, and then they use that to log into your account. You don't know that they've logged into your account because they have your password. So your password didn't have to get reset or any of those kind of things. They can set rules on your mailbox, right? So they set a rule on your mailbox for every email that comes in, forward it to badguy@yahoo.com.
Wow.
Right? And you don't know that that's happening, right? So, those are some of the things that have happened, that we have seen in blogs and in our travels with, here's what to look for, and here are the types of things that you might see. Those are the possibilities of things that can happen.
Are these actors micro targeting, or they use the term phishing? Are they fishing with casting a net, or are they fishing with like a line and a pole?
Both, all of the above. They
Wow.
do all of the above. Some of it. So, you might have heard the term spear phishing, right? So the spear phishing, they're going specifically at someone, right? For whatever reason, right?
Oh man, that's crazy. What's I just had a couple more questions that just come up. One is, how have you seen the needs of and the skill sets of staffing change over time, in terms of the different capabilities? I mean, you've seen it in your own career in terms of just where you started and how you kind of evolve and build on it. But in a managerial role, what are some of those things that now you're looking for today that you might not have looked for 3, 4, 5 years ago even?
Yeah. So, when we talk about the evolution of the tech guy, right, or gal, where I bring you your machine. You remember Saturday Night Live, the character that Jimmy Fallon was the computer guy, move, right? So I mean, and that pretty much was us, right? Or any IT shop, right? So you can't be that guy anymore, right? You have to have some of the soft skills.
Yeah.
Right. And by soft skills, I mean, communication, being able to write emails, collaborate with others. Kind of gone are those days of, the tech guys, I call them the knuckle dragging techs, and I say that affectionately. That's where I come from. I'm one of them. So I get it, right? You sit them in the back in a room in the dark, and you take their phone away because you don't want them talking to people, right? we can't, those folks have to learn, ITIL, and they need to learn project management, and they need to learn those skills so that they can understand how to align with the business, right? Because if you don't know what's going on out there, or you don't know what the users, or I built this, back end systems are the same as front end, right? Just like I hand you this fantastic piece of equipment that's great, and it's got the retina scan and the fingerprint, and don't let me get started on the fingerprinting, but it has all of those things. You can have the same thing happening with the back end, right? And if you have the back end guys, the infrastructure guys who are building the servers and the switches and all of those kind of things, but they don't really know what's going on out in the field because they never work or talk with those people, right? then then they have no way of understanding if the systems that they built are actually producing the results that are needed.
That's interesting. So it's become a more the IT space is becoming an even more dynamic a dynamic space, not only from a technology standpoint, but from the human interaction standpoint.
Yes.
Well,
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you think about the whole evolution of IT, and I'm not trying to date myself, like I've been around since IT was invented or anything like that. But, when you look at that evolution, it started out as, here is this device that you can figure out how to do things with it, right? Now that has evolved to, what are the things that you're trying to do? And now we can innovate by giving you the tech to do that, right?
Was there an inflection point, or is it more gradual? Was there something that you thought that was like, whoa, this is the tipping point towards this?
I think it was more gradual,
Yeah.
but I think where it kind of really turned the corner for me. You remember the old Palm Pilots?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a Palm Pilot, right? And it was like, yes, this great piece of tech. But they would tell you there are certain things that it's just not good at, right? And they would tell you, like, don't keep your recipes on it. Keep that, the index card recipe, because these Palm Pilots, that's just not it's not the best thing, that's not the best use for it. And then Apple came along, right, with the first iPhone. And that is kind of where it's like, wow, this Palm Pilot now seems like not the right.
Yeah.
So now you got the iPhone where you can take pictures and you can keep your recipes. Not only can you keep your recipes, you can stand the phone up on a stand while you're in the kitchen, and you can cook while you're scrolling and talking to somebody and playing your music library, right? And they didn't innovate. They didn't create the cell phone, right? And did they really create smart devices? They kind of married the two together. That's where their innovation, came about. And that was for me, that was kind of like, wow, they seriously got their chocolate in somebody else's peanut butter, right? They took that to a whole new level. And they took two things that already existed, and they made something that was way more functional, right? And so you don't have to carry your Walkman and your cell phone and your book, your Kindle, and you know what I mean? You had all of those things have been kind of put together. And from there, it started to kind of make me think about, how can we be more, lean and agile, right? I'm going to use those two terms, even though, I'm sure somebody's going to want to hit me in the head because of them. But it kind of makes you think a little more in those terms, and it makes you think a little bit more about, because people always ask me, I used to always, in the day, people would ask me, what kind of computer should I buy? Right? And I would say, for the most part, parts are parts. Buy the one from the company that has the best customer service.
It's a good rule.
Right? Because you're going to need help, and I'm going to stop answering you after probably the third call.
Yeah, I'd be interested from both of you. We just got a few minutes left here. Maybe I'll start with you, Rebecca. Like in the, we've worked in government, and the term gov tech comes up a lot, or civic tech. I mean, what do you guys see as what's coming next? Like, now that we've kind of gone through, this pandemic period where we've gone from a physical work environment to a virtual work environment to distributed systems, and what's going to come next? I mean, there's going to be this molding of time and space and interaction, or even like, what are some of the things that we're going to need in this new world that we're stepping into? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that in terms of whether it's technology or from like the user experience, or even things that you're worrying about. I guess that's the other thing I'm kind of contemplating.
I mean, I don't know, but I've thought a lot about, like, the difference between, or I guess how the Internet of Things is like infiltrating, I guess, everything. So like if we've talked a lot about smart cities and autonomous vehicles and adding tech to streetlights. Like, does that all end up becoming more of a security threat than people just driving on their own goodwill or whatever, or DMV class? Because you're then able to infiltrate an entire system as opposed to one bad actor or six bad actors in the city. That's something that
like
I
like
don't have good answers for it, but
you mean like some certain things should remain analog in some
well, no,
regard?
I mean, we talk a lot about like distributed energy is like
Yeah.
the way that everything should be moving is in distributed systems, right? Like you want
Yep.
a smaller loop for your food system, you want a smaller loop for your energy system because it reduces waste. Why, is that conflicting with the way we're starting to think about mobility and transportation by having like a centralized, more of a centralized system than like all of those distributed actors? I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think, because, and we talked about this several years ago, right? When people's toasters were starting to get IP addresses,
Mm-hmm.
And you have all of these distributed, smart devices. Again, great opportunity, nightmare for security people, right?
Yeah.
To think about it. And I think the important thing is to not overthink it.
Yeah.
Right. And because if you overthink it, then you'll end up not doing it. And that's really not the way that you want to go. But I think what we have seen over the last year and a half, a couple of lessons learned, right? So the things that we were worrying about a year and a half ago, we probably aren't worrying about them now, right? So, and there are things now that we worry about that we weren't worrying about then, right? So, and one of the big things that has come of this is going to be remote work.
Yeah.
Right. That was really not as big of a thing. And there are a lot of companies that have given up their workspace or downsized, moved into something smaller. People are working from home. People are working from shared spaces, those kind of things, and a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration as we think about how we're moving forward with tech. And this was kind of a conversation that you and I were talking about, Grant. How much energy was saved, or what's the impact of people not traveling for a year and some months, right? What did we gain from that, and what could we gain going forward if some level of that were to be kept up, or where how do we capture metrics on those types of things, and use that to make the next step, to move forward, right? Because that's what innovation is, right? You take the data and you take two things that you have and put them together.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like through this horrible experience, there is going to originate out of it a number of innovations, I think, which is so fascinating. Just to talk quickly about like you mentioned emissions, like in 2020 we did an analysis with Google that we'll be posting soon, but 20% transportation emissions reduction in the year 2020, because just limited, folks weren't traveling by car or bus, or staying closer to home. And then we saw about a 5 to 7% decrease in energy consumption too. But there's also shifts, and from like the commercial market to the residential market, and
right.
So like there's a rebalancing in some cases that are happening, which is fascinating. So we're coming up against time, and usually, Sylvia, at the end of the show, we ask our guests what they're reading, listening, and watching. So I want to open that up to you, but I also want to another demonstration of your resilience goes beyond just the IT space, but you're also a Chicago Cubs fan, and so there's one of the most resilient fan bases out there, maybe right behind the Pittsburgh Pirates, I think. But I'd be interested in your take on, what are you consuming over these summer months, and also your thoughts on the Cubs and how the baseball season's going.
So what I'm consuming. So I've been reading actually a lot of different books and listening to some audiobooks, mostly geeky stuff, security things, stuff like that. What I've been watching, what I'm binging right now is WandaVision.
Oh.
Because when it first came out, I started watching it. I watched like the first 2 episodes, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna wait until this is completely done, and then I'm gonna start it from the beginning and make my way through it. So that's what I'm kind of halfway through that now. The fact that because of the pandemic, everybody's staying home. That really didn't change my TV habits a lot, right? Yeah. Because I still work the same amount of hours. Nothing changed, when I was in the office, I would work. And then when I would come home from the office, I'd maybe put on some pajamas and then I'd go back to work. So, it really hasn't, hadn't changed my television watching or consumption of other things. Now, as far as the Cubs are concerned, we've got some tough times coming up here, right? Because, the trade deadline is looming, and the Cubs were doing really great and everybody was really excited. And then we had an 11-game losing streak.
I know what those are like.
And then they won, and then they lost again. So it kind of looks like that core from the 2016 World Series team is probably going to get broken up. So it's going to be a big challenge for Cubs fans. And let me tell you why. You talk about resilience, right? Of the Cub fan, and I have been a Cub fan since 1960, right? And so back when they were so bad, you went to drink and hope that a game would break out, right? And then it was like everybody kind of looked up and it's like, wow, they're winning. They're looking good. Like there was like a time in the 80s, and then it was like, oh, never mind. that was just an anomaly, right? And then they became really good.
Yeah.
Right. They became really good. They started out by not sucking. I really like that. They started out try not to suck. Right. Okay. And then they got really good. And then after that, when they would do bad, it's like, I don't know how to be mad at them, right? Because because they've always sucked, right? And then they got good, and then you were really excited. And then when they got bad again, it was kind of like, I don't know how to.
Can't be mad at them.
I don't know how.
Yeah.
I think I'm mad and I want to be, but I'm not sure how to do that because that's never been a thing. You always just kind of, okay, they're doing bad. We still watch and we still fill the stands and we still, now it's like, this is some kind of feeling that I've never had before. And I'm not,
you don't know how to process it.
I think I need a support group or something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Rebecca, do you have anything kind of coming across your desk that you're interested in over the summer? Or
not really. I usually take the summer to work on my plant identification skills, like a true nerd.
How's that going for you? Have you find anything interesting out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty neat app called iNaturalist, so you can kind of take a picture of something and then it'll spit back what they think it might be, which is really nice.
Is it like, don't touch that, that's poisonous? Or?
Yeah, it's gonna give you a big weird rash. Yeah.
What's the weirdest response did you see?
I don't know. I mean, it like looks at where you're at, like locationally. So it kind of spits back what it thinks it is. I don't think I've had anything like groundbreakingly weird.
They did spit back like you're on Mars or something like that.
Do you ever get like to that point is like an unidentified species or something that's that belongs in the Amazon, not in Western Pennsylvania? Or,
No, I haven't gotten anything that crazy yet. What's cool though is that so it spits back what it thinks it might be based on your picture and an algorithm. And then there's a bunch of experts on the other end. And like within a week, somebody else will like verify it. Some expert will verify it and like if it is what you thought it was.
That's very interesting. That's fascinating.
I don't have anything crazy to report though. Nothing.
Well, we want to know if you do. Like, I want to, like, if something pops up in the woods of southwestern Pennsylvania, I want us and our listeners to be the first to know. So,
all right, I'll keep you posted. What about you?
Can it identify clowns?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't try. I have to try that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rebecca, and thanks, Sylvia, for being with us today, and thanks for the work you do for the city of Pittsburgh. As I said, you guys are truly true heroes throughout the pandemic and helping all of us kind of get through, into this virtual new world, brave new virtual world that we're part of. And so thanks for all your work, and thanks for being a guest today.
Thank you, Grant and Rebecca, for having me. I had a blast. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening in to the Grant Street Experience. We appreciate you being here with us today, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.